But you may know that there has been a real effort across the nation, as we've discussed before, about the problems with defunding the police. As we were talking there with interviewed Sergeant Betsy Smith of the National Police Association, along with others like Lieutenant Colonel Barry Bridger, many people that have, and Will Moravitz, that have offered a great topic on what's going on with that and what it has caused in those communities. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper here, and we're going to go into talking with a man who has an expertise on the topic of bail bonds and the problems with what's happening with the softening of that. His name is Ken Good. He is with the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. He is a bonds lawyer. I believe that, if I may be correct on that, we'll ask him when we bring him on. He's going to offer us some more light on the subject matter of what is going on. So let's go ahead and welcome Ken to the program. How are you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much. I just feel like we're missing a low roar. Yay! But yes, thank you for having me on your show.
Yes, sir. It's a pleasure to have you. Let's go ahead and run people down real quick so they can understand a little bit about you, what you do, and the organization of the Professional Bondsmen of Texas.
Well, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for over 30 years. I started out practicing law, representing doctors and hospitals when they got sued. But pretty quickly, I started developing a practice where I started representing bondsmen, got some bondsmen out of some trouble, not criminally, but, helped them in their business. And so that practice has developed and grown, and I am Texas counsel for an insurance company or two. And I'm also, I represent bondsmen across the state. I've written a practice guide on bail law called Goods on Bail. I've written articles on many different issues. I've testified for the Texas legislature. I've proposed bills to the legislature, and I have a wide area that I've used my knowledge. I've argued the two most important cases in the bail law in the last 20 years before the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. So I have a lot of experience and I have written a lot of articles on the issue of bail law or bail reform and how we can improve the system instead of how we can tear it down, which seems to be what we're doing, is what some of our friends are proposing on the other side.
Right. And so, obviously we've had a wave of gun violence in the nation. And a lot of the protections with that, and so is going away. It seems like it's increased, and of course, there's a narrative behind it. I don't know where you might stand on the issue of the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, but obviously, when we talk to many people regarding this issue, because we had Stephen Worthington, and we talked with him as he was one of the people that saved a church from being shot in the South Texas. But where do you stand, first of all, on the protections of the Second Amendment before we go forward on that?
Well, I think where I fall on that is I'm probably a pretty strong Second Amendment person. I kind of come from it maybe a little bit different angle. My argument is, look, we have had so many examples where the government cannot protect its citizens. And so why on God's green earth would we be telling those same citizens we want to take away your guns? If you cannot protect me, at least allow me the ability to have the resources or the instruments that I need to protect myself. And so I think in a lot of situations, we even saw that in Uvalde in South Texas, where law enforcement was there but did not go in for a long period of time. And the people that eventually went in were breaking their orders. They were going against what they were told. And so I think a lot of times you see law enforcement doesn't have the ability to protect everybody. And so we have to allow our citizens to protect themselves in that situation. And that's where I fall.
Right. And so basically, because of the statistics that come out here, you have, according to the Gun Violence Archive, there were 35% increase from 2019 to 2020, and the guns were involved in homicides of 79% in 2020. and obviously a lot of this is really pertaining, like you talk about areas like Chicago, a lot of them where they have really stringent gun laws. There in New York, what we're seeing, but you have really something that you have a thought about what is causing this. Obviously, we've seen a lot of people released out of jail that have been criminals, especially when we dealt with it in 2020. And they used a lot of the excuse of COVID-19 to get these people out, and then they go out and commit more crimes. Tell us your perspective here. You have a really interesting perspective on what is causing those increase in gun violence.
Well, I think the problem that we have, and we see it across our country, is in our urban areas. So we have high population areas, and we have a push from our friends on the left that we need to implement defund the police type policies, that we need to be soft on crime. And I think a lot of what we're seeing is a direct result of those policies. And let me give you one example. How do we process large numbers of people through the jail quickly and efficiently? In Harris County in Texas, we used to do that through bail schedules, and they didn't like those, or the people on the left didn't like them. And so there was a lawsuit and a settlement. And so they decided just to release certain people. Most misdemeanors are now just released on a free bond for $100. They never see a judge. And as a result, they had those types of bonds carry a lot higher failure to appear rate. When you fail to show up for court, then your criminal case gets put on hold. We have to wait for you to come back. There's a study out that says that 80% of those people have to commit another crime before they come back to court. And so what we're seeing is a direct result of those policies. We are creating chaos with simple release or release mechanisms that have been proven not to work. And that's creating chaos in our criminal justice system. We can't get cases resolved. The failure to appear rates are skyrocketing. In Harris County, they dismissed 72% of misdemeanors in 2021, and then 72% in 2020. You're going to see more of that if we continue these types of policies. And even in the very liberal state of New York, they have had 2 rounds of rollbacks where they've just acknowledged that what they did just has not been working. And we need to see more of that. And what the real problem is we claim that we want to protect the poor, but in doing so, we're tying the hands of the judges so they can't address gangs. They can't address career criminals. They can't address organized crime. And that's what's killing us in our urban areas. A lot of this gun violence is gang violence. And if we tie the hands of the judges because we want to have some idea that that we have poor that needs to be protected, that's not being protected, and we just have these across the board rules, they're just killing us because the judges can't do anything about organized crime and gang members. And we have to stop that.
Right. And so, that's actually kind of really in tune with things that, Sergeant Betsy Brenter Smith and I were talking about, because it really kind of correlates there with the whole calls for defunding the police. And then you get these relaxed bail in allowing these people to get into the communities. And then you talk more about the poor. That always seems to be where their go-to excuse is. But then you go and you start looking at the statistics that you guys have talked about, and that is that they're occurring in the urban areas, typically in the areas where there is as they would say, is poverty. So in essence, it's really these policies that they're allowing to happen are harming those communities more directly. Therefore, you start having the rise in violence against them. They end up being afraid to go out. They can't grow their communities because they're continue to be impoverished and hurt by the policies like this that destroy them. So what's going on here? How are they doing this through the bond issues?
Well, I think I would trace this issue back probably 5 or 6 election cycles. And, about every 6 months before a big election, you would see some type of controversy and you would see protests. and you would see a lot of anger build up. And I really thought it was manufactured. I think you could probably conclude that it's manufactured just because of the timing. If it only happens every 4 years, 6 months before a major election, then you start thinking it's timing. The problem is, we had one side of our electorate that had to have their supporters angry so they would come out and vote in larger numbers, and so that they would have a shot at winning. And so over time, their supporters started seeing that, hey, they're saying this 6 months, a year before the election, but after the election's over, they're not doing anything about it. They're just, it's like it's rhetoric to them. So then we started seeing elections where what I would say, they voted into office the true believers, the people who thought these crazy ideas was something that they should do. And so now we've been electing on one side of the spectrum, people who are trying to enact these crazy ideas, where you have people arguing that we need to defund the police and we're just going to send social workers out when the police get a call to 911. And I'm like, I can't wait for these cities to be sued by a social worker who's killed because they've been sent, because 911 can't triage a call. And so then you have all these failures, and you see examples over and over again. And it's the same thing where they tie the hands of the judges, or in immigration, they tie the hands of law enforcement. So they can't even address the real criminals that are coming over and bringing fentanyl in huge numbers, because they want illegal immigration to come over. It's the same thing in bail reform. We have this idea that we're hurting the poor, and so we want to implement policies which are actually causing crime to increase dramatically, and that's hurting the very same minority groups, because they're the ones having those crimes committed on them. Murders are up huge in the inner cities against blacks, and I think that's one of the underreported thing. And there's just so much irony in all this. When you get to criminal justice reform, you have one side of the spectrum saying, oh, we shouldn't be punishing people who are younger than 25 because their brains are not fully developed. But yet those same people are arguing that we need to support transgender and transition for people who are as young as 14 or even younger. And if we don't, then we're just evil people. I'm like, well, wait a minute. Logically, if their brain has not fully developed, why are we supporting them on these types of decisions that in that area is completely permanent? And so, we have a lot of inconsistency, and it just seems like, if you really look at it, it's just a lot of politics coming in. And I think as a result, I think this year we're going to see, hopefully, we're past the time to have these protests, and we haven't had them this year. So I think it's the realization that if they did, we're going to have some type of backlash. So I think this year may be the first year where we vote public safety over identity politics. That is my hope.
I think so too, and especially when we're talking about here on this program, a lot of what's been going on with the landscape of, and not just with defunding the police, but purging out good police officers and anybody really. You talk, about the military, to the aspect of judges being put onto the benches that really shouldn't be there. But speaking of criminal justice reform and all of that, just go back a little bit to where the Trump administration, about how he started to help along some of this, like when you had Kim Kardashian and all of these people going in there and wanting people released that really had been criminals, but some maybe not treated so fairly. Is there any merit to what they're saying on this side about we really need a criminal justice reform because of a misused system?
No. I mean, what you're going to hear from people is that we need to reform our criminal justice system because we've lost the war on drugs and we need to give up, and we just need to realize that. And I think that is such an out of touch argument. I mean, I would argue that those same people would not be making any different arguments if they were in the hands or they were completely controlled by organized crime or in the pocket of gangs. I mean, I read an article one time that I really truly believe that if we give up on fighting drugs, then we're giving up on fighting essentially all crime, because such a large percentage of crime arises from the drug community, the trade is because people are committing burglary because they want money for drugs. We have all these different levels of crime, and it's because of how it is associated with the drug organization that we have in this country. And people tell me, well, we have so many more people in jail in this country. Where do all the drugs in the world come? They come here. Of course, we're going to have a lot more people in jail because we have a lot more drugs, and especially in our inner cities. These same politicians that are arguing for criminal, bad bail reform, they were the same ones that have set up policies that have failed our schools in inner cities, have failed families. Families don't stick together in the inner cities, and they have no economic opportunity because we have riots, we have protests, whatever you want to call them. We have everything gets burned down and they don't come back. And politicians won't even protect their local tax base. And so the next year they have fewer dollars than they had the year before. And this just keeps building and building upon itself. And we have to say we should try these policies too. These are policies that have never worked. What's driving this now also, almost seems like we just want to get rid of the private bail industry. And I would make 2 points about that. Number one, we've been around for 200 years because we do one thing and we do one thing well, and that's get people to go to court. I tell judges, if you don't care whether people come to court, then you don't need us. But I would also make an important second point that I think a lot of the public does not realize. In Texas, the only release mechanism that is constitutionally protected, that is enshrined in the Texas Constitution, is a release by private surety. Every other release mechanism, by a personal bond or by a cash bond, is only recognized by statute. And the Fifth Circuit said during the COVID-19, what the legislature gives, it can take away. And they allowed the governor to limit the use of personal bonds during COVID for violent offenses. So while you have to realize, while they're saying, let's get rid of the private surety, they're wanting to get rid of the only proven thing to work, the only thing that has worked well. And then they're really wanting to get rid of the only way they cannot prevent you from getting out of jail. And we should be standing up. And I know the bail industry is not, doesn't have high reputation because we deal with criminals, but we should be standing on our chairs saying, no, this is the only constitutional protected right I have to release. You cannot take that away from me, and I will defend it. And I think we need more of that.
Ken, do you think that this is a question that just popped in my mind as you were saying all of that? Do you think that there is a system out there that is purposefully raising bonds and all of that so high that certain people can't afford it and are unable to fight against this and be released? Is there a purposeful intent on doing these things to certain groups of people?
No, I don't think so. Because, let's talk about the progression of a criminal. Someone who is a first-time offender who progresses and decides they have a taste for it. The court system gives them a green light and they become career criminals. Initially, when they commit a crime, they call a friend. The friend comes and bails them out of jail. It's a one-time offense. And, our system of justice is intended to put enough pressure on them so that they change, but only enough. And so someone with a substantial criminal history should have more pressure, more punishment. So if they don't learn from their mistake, they get another charge, and they get another charge, and they get another charge. And eventually they can call their friend, but their friend's not going to come. And in so many examples, I tell my children as they grow up, nobody will have your back more than your family. You can have all these friends that put pressure on you, peer pressure as it is when they're teenagers, but nobody will have your back like family. And so you say that because they're like, oh, I can't stand family. You're so dumb. And you beat that into my kids' head when they're growing up. But, you can reach a point where you've burned your family in the criminal justice system so bad, so many times and so bad that even your family, if you call them, they won't come to bail you out. And, those people need to stay in jail because they have reached the point where they're career criminals and they're not going to respond until they get something that will change their course. I have a sister who is dead now, but she had a car accident. She had a 30-year prescription drug addiction. I tried when I was very young to get her put in jail, because at the time that was the poor man's drug rehab. These bail reform measures are making it so that poor families, have no opportunity to get their kids turned around through the poor man's drug rehab. We're making a system where, we've destroyed families, we've destroyed schools, we've destroyed economic opportunity, and now in our inner cities, they're wanting to implement policies where we're destroying their one last chance to become a productive citizen. And that's what I'm fighting against. I mean, we can't give up on people. We can't give up on fighting crime. We can't give up on fighting drugs. And because if we're giving up on fighting drugs, then why do we have a criminal justice system? Everything else builds off of it.
Ken, so what, from this point forward now, what is the direction that we're going to need to go, and some of the solutions that you are setting forth to have this system changed in the right direction?
Well, I think Texas did a pretty good job in the last legislative session about SB 6, about bail reform in Texas. And you can compare that good bail reform versus terrible, crappy bail reform that we see across the country. And what Texas did, number one, is they required judges to review criminal histories before setting bail. So we have a gatekeeper who says, oh, you've got 2 arrests. Well, you should be treated differently than, hey, you've got 7 arrests, or you've got 10 previous convictions, or, hey, you just got out of the pen and you have a substantial criminal history. We can't treat those people the same. I mean, our system was built on we punish people differently just enough to get them to change course. We don't treat everybody the same just because they were charged with the same offense if they have substantially different criminal history. And then the other thing that we did in Texas was we limited the use of PR bonds, personal bonds, free bonds for certain violent offenses. And I think you'll see a little bit of an expansion of that in the next legislative session. We've got a major problem in Harris County. We have a fight in Harris County right now between one side of the spectrum that has one philosophy, and that's to repeat what they did in New York, but not admit that it's not working, just simple release, which is what they're doing for most misdemeanors. And that's a fight between I think them and the rest of Texas. I think there's going to be a change in this election. I think that crime is going to be the number one issue in Harris County as a result of the policies that they've tried. And so I think we need to go back to just implementing or accountability. We are the country of second chances, but we are not the country of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15, 20 chances. Harris County, the Crime Stoppers is making a list, and it's over 175 people who were out on a personal bond for murder or a very low personal bond, free bond, and they committed another murder. Now, if that was a dog, you would say they got one free bite before we consider them dangerous. But I don't really want to live in Harris County if they're going to have a policy that you get one free murder before you're going to be treated like a dangerous, violent criminal. We can't have that. For my life as an attorney, those people wouldn't have been eligible for a bond at all on the first charge, but they're getting out for free and then committing a second murder. And then suddenly the system suddenly decides, well, maybe they're dangerous. Well, maybe they were dangerous the first time. That's the reason why they were accused of a crime. We have to get away from the Gascons, the LADAs of this world, where they think that the criminal is the real victim and not the person who had the crime committed on them. We can't have that. We can't be a society if we are going to give the rights of the criminal and lift them above the rights of the victim. We just can't survive as a country.
I completely agree with that. I think that we've come to. I think that there are things that we need to do. I think with criminals, I believe that there are people that are being treated as criminals that aren't criminals, but you can always tell who the real criminals are. And, we have a justice system that convicts people, but we also have in this country, especially there, I believe in Harris County, which is very corrupt, that a lot of those people are being put in there falsely. We're living in a country now that they get you on some trumped up charges, like what they're trying to do with the J6 committee and all of these things, of course, to get us more. But I think that you're exactly right on us needing to really look into not treating people to be released when they should not be released. We have a big problem of a wrong sympathy for the wrong kind of criminals. So we start lumping everybody into this one basket. We have to do something. It's getting bad. We need to reform all of this system to where it's the right one, and it's helping people, and it's rehabilitating those who could be rehabilitated as criminals, versus the ones who shouldn't, who won't rehabilitate, who won't change, need to stay there. And we need to start taking another direction on getting rid of them here, because I think that, we've become a nation of sympathizing for the criminal, just like what you see there in California. They get away, they can break the law and destroy the lives of communities around them without consequence. It's time for a change. Well, Ken, we're coming up here on the end of the segment. Go ahead and tell everybody how they can find out more information about what you do, what you put out, and to get a better understanding and all of that, everything they can follow you and find you on.
Sure. If you would like to know more information about bail reform across the country and here in Texas, you can go to our website, which is pbtx.com, which is the Professional Bondsmen of Texas, pbtx.com. We're also on Facebook and Twitter by the same name. We also have a podcast that talks to sheriffs, judges, representatives, different sources across the country. I've even invited Right on Crime, which is a right-wing group that seems to have co-opted the left-wing side of criminal justice reform issues. And, they've respectfully declined, but maybe we'll get them on to have an intelligent argument on criminal justice issues. And our podcast, if you can go to our website and click on the tab for podcast, or you can go to thebellpost.com and you can see all of our episodes. We have a blog that we try to highlight news periodically that's about bad bail reform across the country and where good bail reform is being enacted. And more importantly, you see stories all the time now about people who tried bad bail reform, it didn't work out, and so they're rolling it back. And you're seeing that across the country in Alaska, and you're seeing it in New York a couple of times, and you'll continue to see that when they realize what they've done and how bad it was. But those are a few of the places that you can go to get more information about this very important issue.
Yes, sir. Well, Ken, I appreciate you coming on the program here and shedding some light on a subject that even I'm not well versed in. I learned some things from you today that will help an arsenal of information. Thank you for coming on tonight, sir.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it very much.
It was very good. Well, everyone, don't go away. We have more coming. This is Battlefront Frontline.